You're not the one who wasn't enough. He wasn't ready for what you brought to the table. That's something most people don't realize in the moment, especially when a relationship ends unexpectedly, or when you're left sitting with all these questions, wondering if you could have done something differently. You think, was I too much, too intense, too emotional? Maybe I pushed him away. Let me stop you right there. Because the truth is, you were exactly what someone who's ready for a real relationship would want. You weren't too much. You were honest. You were invested. You showed up. When a man loses a woman like that, it's not because she wasn't enough. It's because he wasn't in a place where he could receive what she was offering. He might not have the emotional capacity, the self-awareness, or even the maturity to recognize the quality of what's in front of him. And that's not a reflection of you, it's a reflection of him. But when we're in that moment, heartbroken, confused, we often internalize the loss. We start creating this narrative where it was somehow our fault, where maybe if we'd been a little more patient, a little less expressive, a little more easygoing, he would have stayed. But that's not how it works. A man who's ready doesn't get scared off by a woman who knows what she wants. He doesn't ghost when she communicates her needs. He doesn't pull away when she shows love, loyalty, or strength. In fact, a man who's truly ready finds all of those things magnetic. He doesn't just tolerate your standards, he respects them, because he knows that a woman who brings value into his life isn't just someone to casually date. She's someone to build a future with. And yet what happens so often is this. A high-value woman walks into a relationship fully present, fully herself, giving openly, loving deeply, and the man, instead of rising to meet her, shrinks. Maybe not consciously, but it shows. He becomes inconsistent. He makes excuses. He avoids the real conversations. And eventually he either fades or pushes her away, not because of who she is, but because of what he's not yet ready to be. See, when someone walks away from you, we tend to see that as a statement about our worth. But what if it's actually a gift? What if it's the universe's way of removing someone who couldn't give you what you deserve before you invested even more of your precious time? Because staying in a relationship where your worth isn't seen, where your presence isn't valued, only diminishes your light over time. And if someone can't see what's in front of them, if they treat it casually, if they let it slip through their fingers, that's not your burden to carry. You have to understand something important. You can be the most emotionally intelligent, nurturing, confident woman in the world and still not be right for someone who doesn't know how to receive love. That doesn't mean you're the problem. It just means he's not the one. We're so used to looking inward when relationships fail, which is powerful when it leads to growth, but dangerous when it turns into self-blame. Because there's a fine line between reflection and self-sabotage. And too many incredible women end up dimming their own light trying to fit into a mold that was never meant for them in the first place. They stop expressing themselves fully, thinking that maybe if they tone it down, the next guy won't leave. But you weren't born to be toned down. You were born to be seen. When a man isn't ready emotionally, mentally, or spiritually, it doesn't matter how kind, intelligent, or beautiful you are. He will still let you go. Not because you lacked anything, but because he lacks the tools to appreciate what you offer. And one day he'll look back. He'll remember the way you loved him, the way you made him feel, the way you always tried to understand him, even when he was hard to reach. And he'll realize, I lost someone I will never find again. But that realization won't come when you want it to. It won't come when you're crying on the bathroom floor, checking your phone, hoping for a message. It comes later, when you've already picked yourself up, when you've moved on, when you've started glowing in ways you didn't know you could. Because heartbreak has a funny way of becoming the beginning of your next chapter, not the end of your story. And let me say this, walking away doesn't mean you failed. It means you finally realized that loving someone doesn't mean sacrificing yourself. It means you had the strength to say, I want more. I deserve more. And that's not weakness. That's courage. The real win isn't getting him back. It's reclaiming your self-worth. It's remembering who you were before you bent yourself into shapes to be easier to love. It's learning to trust your gut when it tells you that something feels off, even when your heart is still attached. That is strength. That is power. And that is the kind of self-love that sets you free. So no, you didn't lose him. He lost you. He lost the woman who was willing to love him fully, who was willing to build with him, who showed up with intention and depth. And he won't find that again easily, because women like you don't come around every day. He lost the woman he'll never find again. Emotional availability is not some luxury that you hope a partner might have. It's a baseline requirement for a real relationship. And yet so many people lower the bar, tell themselves maybe he just needs time, or he's been through a lot. And suddenly they're carrying the emotional weight of two people. What we often mistake for love is really hope. Hope that someone will eventually rise to meet us where we're already standing. But let me tell you something, a person who's not emotionally available doesn't lose you because he didn't love you. He loses you because he didn't know how to love you in the way you needed and deserved. See, you brought something real to the table, vulnerability. And that takes courage. That means you were willing to show your heart, to open up, to create space for something meaningful. But when you give that to someone who isn't ready, they don't treat it like the gift it is. They don't nurture it. They don't protect it. They question it. They distance themselves from it. Not because you did anything wrong, but because they can't handle the mirror your love holds up to them. You see, real love reflects truth back at someone. And that truth can be confronting. It says, this is what it looks like when someone shows up. This is what it feels like when someone is emotionally present. And when someone isn't ready to face their own fears, their own past, their own inability to be vulnerable, they retreat. They may even tell themselves that you're the problem, that you're too intense, too emotional, too much. But the truth is, you're just clear. Clear on what you want, clear on what you're willing to give. And when someone isn't emotionally available, that clarity threatens the comfort of their avoidance. There's a kind of person who will take everything you offer, your time, your energy, your compassion, and they'll enjoy the attention, enjoy the connection, but they won't invest back. And at some point you realize you're doing all the emotional heavy lifting. You're the one checking in. You're the one initiating conversations about where things are going. You're the one creating emotional safety for both of you while he just coasts. Maybe he says all the right things when you confront him. Maybe he promises change. Maybe he says, I've never felt this way before, and you want to believe it. But watch the actions, because emotional availability doesn't live in words. It lives in consistent effort. People who are emotionally unavailable often don't intend to hurt you, but they still do. And the damage comes in the form of confusion. You start questioning your worth. You start wondering if you were too much. And that self-doubt is what lingers long after they're gone. But the truth is, you were never too much. You were just too real for someone who was afraid of being seen. It's easy to look back and think, maybe if I had been more patient, maybe if I had given him more time. But how long should you wait for someone to meet you with the same emotional depth you bring? A year? 2? Your energy, your openness, your presence. They're not limitless, and giving them to someone who can't hold them with care is like pouring water into a cup with a hole in the bottom. It doesn't matter how much you give, it's never enough to fill them. And this is where you reclaim your power. By understanding that you didn't lose him, he lost the woman he'll never find again, because you are not common. You don't hide behind games. You don't withhold affection as a strategy. You show up, you communicate, you lean in, even when it's scary. And when someone walks away from that or fumbles it because they can't handle the intimacy, that's not your burden to carry. He didn't walk away because you weren't lovable. He walked away because he couldn't receive love in the way you gave it. He couldn't match the emotional quality you brought into the space. And maybe he's been hurt. Maybe he's guarded. Maybe he doesn't know how to be vulnerable. But again, that's not yours to fix. You are not someone's rehab center. You are not someone's emotional proving ground. You're not there to coax, to beg, or to teach someone how to love you. You gave him access to a woman who listens deeply, feels fully, and connects with purpose. And if he couldn't recognize that while he had it, that's not a reflection of you, it's a reflection of where he is in his journey. There are people who go their whole lives chasing surface level interactions because they're terrified of depth. So when depth shows up in the form of a real emotionally present woman, they run, they shrink, they self-sabotage. And in doing so, they walk away from the exact thing they say they're looking for. That's why emotional availability isn't a bonus. It's the foundation. Without it, everything else crumbles. You can't build connection with someone who only opens up in moments of crisis. You can't grow with someone who retreats every time things get real. You can't love someone into being ready. They have to want to meet you there. And if they don't, that's not a tragedy. It's a redirection. You gave your best. You loved wholeheartedly. You were brave with your emotions. And if he wasn't ready for that, then he didn't lose just any woman. He lost the woman who could have brought real depth, real love, real evolution into his life. And when he finally realizes what that was, when he's sitting across from someone who can't hold a deep conversation or who only shows up halfway, he'll remember the woman who did. The woman who was all in. The woman who was emotionally present, clear, grounded, real. And by that time, you'll be long gone. Not because you weren't loyal, but because you finally understood your love deserves someone who doesn't flinch when it shows up fully. He didn't lose you. He lost the woman he'll never find again. You didn't lose him. He lost you. And not just you as a person. He lost the energy, the love, the loyalty, and the emotional presence you brought into his life. He lost the way you saw him when you were all in. And I need you to understand something important here. He didn't lose you because of who you were. He lost you because of what he wasn't. You showed up. You were there when it mattered. You gave your energy, your vulnerability, your patience. You gave second chances, maybe third. You tried to communicate, to connect, to understand him. You kept asking yourself, what more can I do? You stayed when it was hard. You believed in his potential. You believed in the story you were trying to build together. Whew, that's powerful. That's rare. But love isn't enough if only one person is holding the weight of it. And at some point you had to step back and ask yourself, if I keep doing all the work, what's left of me? Because it's exhausting trying to hold space for someone who isn't showing up for you emotionally. It's painful loving someone who's so consumed with their own fears, pride, or indifference that they can't recognize the gift standing right in front of them. He didn't lose you because you weren't beautiful enough, funny enough, exciting enough, or whatever excuse your mind tries to feed you at 2 a.m. He didn't lose you because you were too much. He lost you because he gave too little. He lost you because he didn't listen when you expressed what you needed. He lost you because he couldn't be consistent with his words, his actions, or his energy. He lost you because he couldn't meet you with the same level of emotional courage and maturity that you were bringing. And maybe it didn't happen all at once. Maybe it was slow. Maybe it was months of micro disappointments, a missed call here, a changed plan there. a subtle withdrawal when things got real. You felt it. The emotional gaps that started opening. You started shrinking parts of yourself just to keep the peace. You started rationalizing things that used to be non-negotiables. You started convincing yourself to stay in something that didn't feel safe or fulfilling anymore because you remembered the potential. But potential doesn't build relationships. Effort does. Consistency does. Vulnerability does. Here's the thing. When you are an emotionally available, lightly and grounded person, you don't fall in love lightly. You give your time and your heart with intention. So when someone mishandles that, it's not just disappointing, it cuts deep. Because it's not just a breakup, it's a rupture of what you thought you were building together. But that pain, that confusion, that spiral of self-doubt, where you question whether you were too needy, too intense, or not enough, that doesn't belong to you. That's the residue of someone else's emotional unavailability. You did your part. You were brave enough to show your heart. You were strong enough to hope. You were real. You were present. And he was inconsistent, or distant, or unavailable, or passive. Or maybe he was charming at the start, but disappeared the moment things got too intimate or too serious. And you kept waiting for him to wake up, to realize what he had. But let me tell you something. When someone wants to be in your life, they don't need to be reminded to show up. They just do. They move towards you, not away from you. It's easy to blame yourself when someone slowly drifts away. You know, one of the hardest pills to swallow is this. Sometimes we find ourselves trying to convince someone to love us, to see us, to realize our worth. We give, we show up, we invest, we stay when it's hard, and we think maybe if I just love them harder, maybe then they'll get it. But here's the truth that most people miss. The right person doesn't need a PowerPoint presentation on why you're valuable. They don't need you to prove yourself or to chase or to overextend just to be seen. They already see you. They already know. When someone is right for you, I mean truly aligned with your value, they won't treat you like an option. They won't take you for granted or keep you guessing. There's no emotional roller coaster. They won't go hot and cold depending on their mood or their ego or how many other distractions they have going on. You won't have to wait 3 hours to get a text back. You won't find yourself rationalizing their behavior, shrinking your needs, or feeling like you're too much just for wanting clarity and consistency. Because when a person really recognizes your worth, they act accordingly. They don't risk losing you over pride. They don't need space to figure out how they feel after months of you showing up for them. They're not out here breadcrumbing, giving you just enough to keep you hoping, but never enough to make you feel secure. No, someone who truly sees your value shows it, not in just words, not in empty promises, but in consistent, grounded action. Every single day. Let me say this again, because I want you to hear it in your bones. Love should not feel like convincing. It should not feel like you're auditioning for a role in someone's life. You don't need to compete. You don't need to prove that you're worthy of love. You are worthy right now as you are. You bring something incredibly rare to the table. Your honesty, your heart, your loyalty, your capacity to care deeply, to stand by someone, to nurture, to support. And not everyone can meet that. Not everyone is capable of holding that. But that's not a reflection of your value. That's a reflection of their readiness. There are people out there who are so used to chaos, to inconsistent love, to transactional relationships, that when they encounter something real, something emotionally healthy, they panic. They pull away. Not because you've done anything wrong, but because they're not prepared for it. They don't have the tools to hold something deep and steady. And if you're not careful, you'll start internalizing their emotional unavailability as your inadequacy. You'll start thinking, Maybe I wasn't enough. Maybe I should have tried harder. Maybe I scared him off. No, you didn't scare him off. You simply reflected what he wasn't ready to rise to. That kind of love, the real kind, it challenges people. It asks for accountability.